Yeah, when you see my lips moving and you're not hearing anything coming out, it means I forgot to turn my microphone on. So I've just joined the MOOC. When George asked me to participate, I could not say no. I'm totally fascinated by this medium, but you know, like many people, I found myself kind of overwhelmed when it started. So I'm forced to jump in now. I've been reading the orientation materials. I think I've got a pretty good idea of how it goes. But when George first asked me, I thought, my book will be coming out not long after that. Why don't I use this as an opportunity to force myself to create a presentation around the book early? So we are in an interactive medium here, and I do pay attention to the chat, and I would like for us to have a much more freewheeling interactive session tomorrow. But what I've prepared for today is kind of the high altitude, very rapid overview about the social media literacies that I talk about in my book. I am going to try to monitor the chat and respond from time to time if I can. If not, Dave is going to take note of any unanswered queries and we will get to them. So feel free to interrupt me while I am presenting and we can talk about it. But my main idea is that I will present the overview of the material mostly today, and then tomorrow at the same time we'll have a completely open session. I have no agenda planned for it. Maybe we can plan an agenda for it at the beginning of the session. I have used this platform before, and when I do it with people in Rheingold U, the courses I teach online, I've discovered that why not take advantage of the affordances for activity in this medium. So while I'm presenting, there are a lot of things that people can do. These are roles that people in my courses have come up with. I ask them to put their names under something that they want to take responsibility for. So searchers, obviously, I'm sure that you do this all the time. Look up relevant resources while the session is going on and drop them into the chat. I've also found that after we're done, it helps to have some people put those URLs into context, the way a good blogger does. And I'm sure that people are going to do their own blogging about this, but the idea is that a person or more than one person would volunteer to pull those URLs out of the chat after the session is over and provide a little context, a sentence or two or three about them. And that material would then be helpful for anyone who wants to summarize. I've been looking at the incredibly excellent video summary of Nancy White's session, so that I know that people are going to remix this in a lot of different ways, and people who do summaries can be useful in that regard. I like to use the whiteboard for a kind of freewheeling mind mapping session. If we have a chance at the end of the session today, I'd like to do that, and so I ask people to try to keep in mind what the top level and second level categories are when we do that. That's what I mean by mind mappers. And then I've got a category for what else. For example, some people suggested curating using something like Digo or Delicious or Pearl Trees. So it's entirely up to you. If you want to take any of these roles, feel free to do so. If you want to declare your commitment to doing that, go ahead and double-click on the little A and write your name on the whiteboard under the role you want to take. I see we've got a fair number of people here today. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody jumping up to put their name under this, like this. But I'm actually not volunteering for that role. Okay, maybe we'll do this tomorrow.
Howard, I was wondering if we're seeing the same page. Because right now I'm looking at the HR Rheingold homepage, and I see that somebody's put searcher on there.
Really strange, because I created another page.
Oh, I don't see it. Oh, I see it now. There we go. How about this one?
Okay, so I see Doug, Dave has jumped in here, so people are seeing that. If Jen is right and it's set so everyone can move slides on their own, maybe it's better to reset it. So I think I clicked that follow thing in the upper right-hand corner. Am I correct on that follow thing? Okay, so I'll give people a second to sign up here if you want. I mean, it's not necessary to sign up to do these things. Okay, whoever wrote "I can help with URLs," I believe, copy and summarize. I'm going to put that under contextualizer, and we need a name for that. Name with that. Okay, I want to keep this moving fairly rapidly, so I'll give you another few seconds if people want to jump in and take one of these roles. What's the problem with the whiteboard? Kate? I'm going to let Dave take that, and I'm going to get started here. So again, this is going to be presentation style, but we can stop and talk when you want. So if you think that digital culture is maybe making our entire culture shallow, why not learn how to swim and explore the deep end of the pool? The way we search today, the way we stream video from our mobile phones, the way we update our Facebook status matters to me and to you and to everyone, because the way we use the online media that are emerging today is going to influence the way those media are used and misused for decades to come. So instead of limiting my inquiry to rather well-known questions such as is Google making us stupid, or is Facebook commoditizing our privacy, or is Twitter chopping our attention into micro slices? All very good questions. I've been asking myself and others how to use social media mindfully and intelligently and humanely. So I've had my own 30 years of experience online, and I've interviewed as many of the masters of social media literacies today as I could over the last couple of years, and in a couple of months, early March, my book on what I have found will be coming out. So what I'm going to do today is do a really high-level summary of what I talk about in that book, and David said it was a simple and practical guide. It certainly is meant to be a practical guide. It may not be that simple. I wanted to scaffold it as much as possible in empirical research and to give people links so that they could go and find out whether what I was asserting was accurate or not. So it's like my other books. If you've read any of my other books, it is written for a popular audience. It's not written as an academic work, but I do hope that it has solid scholarship in it. So I'm thinking about 5 literacies. This certainly doesn't exhaust the number of literacies, and I've had a certain amount of debate about using the word literacy, and I really want to move away from the idea of skill. So that metaphor I started with learning to swim. If you know how to swim, it's going to help you if you fall in the water. If you know how to ride a bicycle, it's going to get you from place to place much faster, whether anybody else has a bicycle or not. But when we're talking about social media, it's not just the skill of encoding and decoding that literacy usually refers to. There's a social component in all of these. It really has to do with using these skills productively in concert with others. So I believe the fundamental skill is attention, and of course there's a lot of attention being paid to attention these days, as it should be. I cited a statistic that I found that 1 in 6 people have reported that they have bumped into something or somebody while walking down the street while looking at their phone. And certainly we see that every day. And the issue of can people multitask online or not, or should they or not, is one that's a big controversial issue these days. Empirically, the research seems to show that if, at least with the kind of sort of toy experiments that you have to do in the laboratory, people are not effective multitaskers. What we don't know is whether that has to do with innate human limitations, and certainly there are some, or whether we can push those limitations. I started thinking about this most seriously when I started facing students in classrooms, and I know that some of you who are participating today also have this experience. If you are a professor or a teacher in a wired classroom today, you have to come to terms with the fact that many or all of your students are not looking at you, they're looking at their laptops. And some professors are in denial about it. Other teachers turn Wi-Fi off or ask their students to put the lids down, and I think that's entirely legitimate, depending on what you're intending to do while you're in a face-to-face classroom. I teach about social media, so I think it's kind of a cop-out to not address it. So I started dealing with, first, the way my students attend to their laptops by making a video. I stood in front of the class and I realized that they don't see what it looks like from my point of view. So I made a video of them with their permission, and then I came back the next week, I put it on YouTube, and I showed it to them on the big screen that you can see behind me there. And while I was showing it to them, again with their knowledge and permission, I had somebody video at the back of the classroom. And notice this student's screen here. For some reason, while I was showing that video on the screen at the front of the classroom, he decided he was going to watch it on my video blog. And that's what you're seeing on the screen there. And after you zoom in a little bit, he then clicked over to my home page. This is while I'm standing up talking, showing them the video of themselves looking at their laptops. And then you'll see he's the one on the left here. As the camera zooms in, he goes back to doing his email, which is interesting because that particular student was one of the most attentive in the class. If I had stopped him and said, what am I talking about right now, I'm quite sure he would have been able to tell me. And he got one of the rare A+. Years go by without anybody getting an A+. So my curiosity was piqued by this. The question, which I don't have an answer to yet, and I don't think that we have sufficient empirical evidence for yet, is was he just born that way, the way some people are innately better at running quickly, or did he learn something about attention? So I started using some attention probes in the classroom, and what I mean by attention probes is what's sometimes called mindfulness, or you could call it metacognition. Wikipedia has an excellent page on metacognition. Simply being aware of where you are deploying your awareness. So I asked the students not to close their laptops, but to start becoming aware of what they are paying attention to, and that's where the attention probes came in. I started out by asking them to close their laptops, shut the lids on their laptops, turn their phones off, and close their eyes. and spend a minute just noticing their breath and noticing how their thoughts would carry them away and go back to noticing their breath. I did not use the word meditation, but this is the fundamental mindfulness meditation. And the objective of this, I noted, was not to stop thinking, but just to notice how their thoughts will run away with them without any real conscious effort on their own behalf. So one of the goals of regular mindfulness training, call it meditation if you want, or metacognition, is to start developing a habit, start firing those neurons that observe where you are deploying your attention. So I asked my students to co-teach with me, and I asked each co-teaching team to come up with a different attention probe. An attention probe being something that helps people get back to that metacognition of where they're deploying their attention. For example, one team rang a bell at random intervals and had people fill out a yellow, orange, or red Post-it note and put it on the whiteboard. Yellow to put down if they were thinking about something that was relevant to what the class discussion was about at the moment, to write that down anonymously and put it on the board. Orange if they were thinking of something that was tangentially related to what we were talking about in class, and red if they were thinking about something that wasn't related at all to what we were talking about in class. Again, the objective there was simply to just start becoming aware of where we're putting our attention. Another probe was in a class of 60 students to say that 5 could have their laptops open at any one time, and one of those 5 would have to close their laptop lid before another person in the class could open it. One of the student teams came up with a probe where he said, when you see me holding a writing implement in my right hand, put your thumb on the desktop. It was pretty interesting to see the results of that and to talk about the results of that. So I'm hoping that one of the learning activities we can do is to use the wiki space that we've got here for my session to add some attention probes to that. And we can talk about that tomorrow when we have time to talk at greater length. So, I really have been thinking ever since then, I think that was about 7 years ago when I started dealing with the attention in the classroom, about the way I and other people pay attention to information. And so I started calling it infotension, for lack of a better term, to try to combine techniques of awareness of how we are deploying our attention. And of course, if you want to talk about meditation, these techniques go back a long ways. Certainly meditators are not the only ones who use it. Jet fighter pilots learn to use it. And I would say to people who say that multitasking is flat out impossible, I would say that a jet fighter pilot in combat is proof that it is possible for some people. They have to aviate, navigate, communicate in 3 dimensions and not get shot down at the same time. So maybe what they're doing, probably what they're doing cognitively, is very rapid task switching, but somehow or another when they switch tasks, they don't lose time trying to get back up to speed. And we don't really know whether they are inborn, again, or trained. But I've begun thinking about training my own, and it has had some success for me, and I've been recommending it to others. So this infotension has 2 parts. One of them has to do with the information tools, and one of them is the cognitive part of that. So in the book, I really do get into an expansion of what attention requires and what attention means, from the point of view of the cognitive scientist. We're all having this experience right now. We have this experience whenever we're online. We need to make little decisions, micro decisions all the time about, am I going to click on that link? Am I going to pay attention to that question in the chat? Or am I going to ignore it entirely? Is this something that maybe I'm going to open a tab on my browser and check it out later after I finish my current task? Or is it something that I'm probably not going to want to put on my attentional queue for the day, but I know it's something that interests me, so I'm going to tag it and bookmark it for later? making these decisions more conscious, and at first maybe a little bit more slowly and then eventually more rapidly, making those decisions as they come along and knowing why you are making the decisions is a big part of it. Part of that is knowing what your goals are for the day. So I take a piece of paper and I write down what it is I'm going to be paying attention to that day, and sometimes there's 2 or 3 things, and today this is the most important thing, and I put that piece of paper in the corner of my desk under one of my screens here, so that every once in a while my attention falls on it. When my attention falls on it, I ask myself whether what I'm doing at the moment is bringing me any closer to where I'm going. When I was writing the book, I actually had a week-by-week calendar down there in which I had an idea of what I was supposed to accomplish by the end of the day. So I can't set your priorities for you. We all have to make those decisions ourselves. Sometimes my priority is just to follow wherever my wandering attention wants me to go. And I trust my instincts that I'm going to learn things that way. And I think that that's a legitimate and important way to learn. If it gets in the way of getting other things accomplished, then I think that's a problem. But I don't believe that productivity is my God. I think that learning is an important part of what I do, and sometimes I need to interrupt what I thought I was supposed to be doing. So the other part of the cognitive side of infotension is trying to match my attentional strategy. So I've got this reminding me of what I'm supposed to be doing, and I've got a lot of things happening. Matching my attentional strategy to the way my tools look online. So I use NetVibes for that because it gives, I think, a really good way of setting several different levels of attention. I've used all the different RSS readers out there, but I like NetVibes because you can create a different dashboard. I can have a dashboard for teaching a course, or I can have a dashboard for researching a book, or a dashboard for my general interests. And then you can arrange tabs on that dashboard so that the most relevant ones are at the left, and because we're used to reading from left to right, and then I can shift those on a daily basis depending on my priorities. And then at the level of the page, or the level of the tab, I can move the most relevant feeds to the left. I can move the ones that are updated the most often to the top. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. The important thing is to match what you believe your priorities are to the way you visually arrange your incoming information. And then I'm adopting BJ Fogg's strategy for changing habits. Start small, find a place for it in your life, and repeat, and then you've established a habit. So writing my goal for the day, setting it over here on the side, asking myself these micro-decision questions, that doesn't take a lot of work, but it has established a new attentional habit for me. So to summarize, attention can be trained. It's not just meditation. I cite a certain amount of neuroscience and cognitive science research about that, without a doubt. Breathe. Now, Linda Stone has pointed out what she calls email apnea. That if you look that up, search her. If you can go look up email apnea, you will find Linda Stone's blog post on that. She noticed that people, when asked, tend to hold their breath at times when they're doing their email. Not a good thing for you to be holding your breath and not knowing it. So paying attention to your breath, of course, is important to mindfulness training as well. Just remember to breathe once in a while. And this one takes more explication than I can get into at the moment, but seriously, paying attention to what you intend to do is how your mind changes your brain. The famous saying that's attributed to Donald O. Hebb, although he didn't actually say it, it was a professor at Stanford, is that neural networks that fire together wire together. So the more you pay attention to your attention, the more you are establishing a kind of inner observer that can help you deal with multitasking or not, focusing or not, getting what you need done. not using your attention in a way that's destructive to you or others. So I think the next most important, I'm prioritizing these in terms of what you need in order to be able to thrive online. I think first of all you need to know where your attention is going, but after that, it's really up to you to determine the validity of the information you see. So I'm calling this critical consumption. Less politely, I take a term from Hemingway and call it crap detection. One of the things I've assigned on the wiki for the readings is my piece on crap detection 101. I really got started with this quite a number of years ago, before Google, when the search engines first started. My daughter started writing papers using search engines. Oh gee, well, she's 27 now. She was in middle school then, so quite a long time ago. I sat her down. I knew about this back then, and many of you probably know about this as well. I said, search on Martin Luther King. You'll notice that this is the third link down on Google. It's about the fourth or fifth link down on Bing. You can find it on Yahoo and other search engines. Is this Martin Luther King Jr. a true historical examination? You click through on that, and it looks like a legitimate website about the civil rights leader. You start looking around, and you find that it's not very laudatory. In fact, it claims that the true historical record is that Martin Luther King is, as they call him here, a beast. So I asked my daughter whether she thought that was legit or not, and she said, I don't know. How do I find out? So I said, well, look for an author. If you can't find an author, I would turn my credibility meter back a lot. If you find an author, then go search on that author's name and see what others have to say. You can't do this recursively forever, but you also have to take opinion with a grain of salt as well. The important point I made to my daughter was, you go to the library, get a book out. You might disagree with it, but you can be pretty sure that a number of people were paid, and their reputations depended on checking whether factual claims were accurate or not. You put a question into a search engine, you can get the answer to any question almost immediately, but it's now up to the consumer of that information, you, to determine whether it's accurate or inaccurate, or misinformation or disinformation. The authority of the text, for better or worse, is gone forever. We need some tools to try to think critically about what we find. One of them is Whois. I showed my daughter. I said, look, you can use Easy Whois. You can put the name of that website, the URL of that website, into Easy Whois, and it tells you that someone by the name of Don Black at stormfront.org is responsible for this website, and you can then search on that and find out that it's a white nationalist community. In fact, Wikipedia calls it a neo-Nazi internet forum, which in fact it is. And in recent years, they have started actually putting their name on that website. Before then, it was known as what's known as a cloaked website, and there are plenty of those out there for all kinds of causes. You need to do a little digging to find out about it. This one, when I first discovered it, was really scary. Fill in your name and press the Start Test button. When you press the button, it says remain still while we scan you. So, I think almost everybody knows that there is no such thing as an online pregnancy test. But, there are a number of teenagers get pregnant every year because they really are not sure where babies come from. I think some people could believe it. They've changed the site so that it sort of progressively reveals that it's a joke. So I filled in the name Joe, and I clicked on Start Pregnancy Test. And congratulations, Joe. You're with child. That's apparently the child there. So I clicked on the next one, View My Baby, and found out it's a girl. Of course, by this time I think most people are pretty aware Notice that they've got legit ads over on the right for pregnancy tests. So, is this a money-making scam, or is it a joke, or is it a crap detection exercise, or I treat it as all three. So I clicked on Who's the Daddy, and at this point it ought to be pretty clear that this is a joke. You can continue with this even further. But as I said, when I first started, only the first screen was there. It didn't really tell you it was a joke. There are all kinds of websites out there that look legit but are not. This one claims to have cracked the genetic code and created a genetically engineered monkey that understands English and can type. Completely bogus. I think those of you who are teachers have probably used this one. Apparently the Pacific Northwest tree octopus, a completely non-existent species, is threatened with extinction. So, again, to summarize, crap detection, there's a lot more detail in the book and in that blog post on the wiki. Think like a detective. Look for clues. Start out skeptical. Search to learn. No, don't just search to get an answer. Sometimes you just want to know where the nearest pizza joint is. But when you are trying to learn something, a search ought to be an ongoing exploration, not a one-stop shop. Look for authors. Search on their names. Triangulate. Journalists look for 3 sources that they believe, whether that's an official source or whether it's a personal source they trust before they pass information along. I found this to be particularly useful with breaking news on Twitter, and I get into some detail about that in the book. Also, there's been a fair amount of talk. Cass Sunstein's famously the Daily We, and more recently Eli Pariser's The Filter Bubble, about the way that people get trapped in our networks of sources that are sources we generally agree with. And I think it's important to have sources you know to be not bogus, to be intelligent, but with whom you disagree enough on a regular basis that they annoy you. If nobody in your network annoys you, you are in an echo chamber. Yes, teaching crap detection begins with teaching students that facts should be scrutinized. You know, there's a bit of a problem with this in terms of teaching young children who definitely ought to learn this. As a parent, it's really difficult to put up with the why is that chain. At some point, you just stop it because you want to get on with your life. But actually, you want to encourage that. And as a teacher, if you're dealing with a classroom of 20 or 30 students, crowd control is part of the issue. You can't encourage people to question authority at all times. And many parents do not want teachers teaching their kids to question authority. So I see a real collision there. I don't have an answer to it. All I know is that you need to make your own choices as a parent and as a teacher. And if you want to prepare your kids for the future, asking them to question what they find online ought to be the first thing you do. So, as I said, moving in at high altitude and pretty rapidly through these literacies, again, attention, crap detection, now we're on participation, then we're going to talk about collaboration and network know-how. Participation is, of course, the foundation of the web as we know it. If the U.S. government or the UN or IBM or Apple had decided they would build the web, they would still be cranking away at it. If you create a simple way for people to put up their own web pages and put up a picture of their dog and link to their favorite websites, then you get billions of web pages in a couple of years, and I don't know how many billions we have now. So in terms of participation, I point out a few stories. Heather Lover here, when she organized a boycott against Time Warner because they were sending lawyer letters to Harry Potter fan sites. After they backed down, the Warner lawyers found out that she was 16 years old at the time. Bev Harris until then, a relatively little-known blogger discovered the source code for the Diebold voting machines, and she believed that the technology used for the fundamental act of democracy ought not to be secret. So she posted that code. It was picked up by more popular bloggers. The code itself spread around. Eventually, Diebold sued Swarthmore students who had put it on a server there, and the Swarthmore students won their lawsuit. Wael Gonim, of course, I don't want to identify him as the leader, but a lot of the planning for the revolution that started happening in Egypt about a year ago happened through social media. And of course, here we've got teenagers that started what are now world-changing enterprises in their dormitory rooms. Now, I emphasize the youth of these folks here simply to point out the empowerment that comes with knowing how to blog, knowing how to wiki, knowing how to spread information through networks, knowing how to crowd detect. There's one kind of, I cover a lot of different aspects of participation. I love Ross Mayfield's power law of participation curve here, because it shows that you can start with really lightweight activities like reading and favoriting, tagging, and then move on to more involved participation like commenting or sharing or refactoring, and then ultimately into collaboration, to virtual communities, starting groups. One aspect of participation that's received a lot of attention lately, and I think it's a good idea, is curation. So I'm just quickly going to run through some of the benefits of curation. I teach this in my face-to-face courses and my online courses. It's a way that we can all act as crap filters for the web. Better than crap filters. Instead of just filtering out the bad stuff, we can filter the good stuff for each other. And initially, a good reason to do it for anyone is to transform overload into useful knowledge for yourself and for others. It's what open source programmers call scratching an itch. We all have to tag and bookmark things for ourselves anyway. The great genius of Delicious, the first social bookmarking service, was that it enabled you to make your choices public with no extra cost to yourself. It didn't cost you any money, it didn't cost you any time. You simply enabled people to read your choices. And of course, when many people do that, it aggregates into a really useful resource for everybody. And we're seeing not just Delicious and then Digo, but a lot of other curation tools emerging as well. If you want to establish yourself as an expert, then help people find the good stuff, and they will spread the word. Also, if you want to find others who share your interests, maybe even to collaborate with you, to send you information, curation sends out a signal that you are interested in this topic, that you know something about the topic, and also sends out a signal that you are a participator. You are willing to contribute. Maybe people are going to contribute back to you. Some sociology research by Barry Wellman and others has indicated that the single most important factor in determining whether a person is going to receive help online is whether they've given help online. And this comes to the issue of social capital, the ability of groups of people, whether they're small groups or large populations, to do things together outside of the formal institutions of contracts and laws. And the definition of social capital also often stresses networks of trust and norms of reciprocity, which are exactly what people practice when they do curation. I'm sorry, URL for the graphic, which a number of hours on task or learning within a culture of inquiry more significant to inventors of world-changing tech. I would say not significantly more. I mean, if you're going to be a web entrepreneur, you certainly have to do it. But I think it's significant to everybody. If you want to find out about a field, then you're going to find that people know what they're talking about. You're going to follow what they filter. If you want to establish yourself in that field, you ought to do that for others yourself. So Henry Jenkins and Mimi Ito, Yochai Benkler and others have talked about what happens when a significant proportion of the people who are online are makers as well as consumers of culture. They call it a participatory culture, and claim that a person who contributes, whether you're simply tagging or whether you're curating or you're blogging or you make a little Wikipedia edit, you think of yourself differently than as a person who only consumes culture. Before the internet, pretty much most of culture was broadcast, and the only choice people had was which channel to watch, which magazine to buy. Now we have, of course, many choices about what we're going to consume, but also many people contribute as well. And I'm of the school that a participatory culture is a healthy culture. So I want to jump back to the very beginning here. I touched base on some of the criticisms. There are some critiques that are important to pay attention to. I like Nicholas Carr's book, The Shallows. He's a really excellent writer. It's really well scaffolded with research. I like Sherry Turkle's book, Alone Together. I think that she raises some really important cautions about the way our media may be getting in the way of our relationships, but nobody's really proved that their arguments are right, are empirically absolutely correct. And I think that if we are going to assume that's the case, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it may well be that participating and crap detecting and training our attention is not going to improve the media sphere. It's not going to improve our lives significantly, but there's a chance that it does. There's really no chance that it does if you assume that you have no power. So I'm going for empowerment. I think individuals do better if they know these things, and I think that the culture will do better if more individuals know these things. So I really wrote this book because I think it's the answer to what do we do now about this enormous flood of crap online, about all of the negative ways that social media are impacting our culture. I think it's a literacy, and I think that just having access to the technology is enough. We need to know how to use it. There are certainly plenty of ways to participate today, and there's a new one born every day. You don't have to do all of them. You don't have to do a lot of them, but I think doing one of them certainly changes your attitude and how you participate online. So, I think there are times when you need to focus, and there are times when having parallel channels is not really distraction. It's part of the learning experience. So I do pay attention to the chat from time to time. I try to address it in what I'm saying here. I am not in the all multitasking is bad school. I think that this is a great platform for training groups of people to learn how to use multitasking productively. So again, to summarize, don't just consume, create. There are all kinds of ways to do it. Tim O'Reilly wrote an article, I think it's worth searching on and putting in the chat, called Architecture of Participation. The way the web is arranged, the way social bookmarking, a lot of other things are arranged, it makes it possible for people to make small acts in their own self-interest that add up to public goods for everyone. We've never really seen this before. Some people call it the magic cooking pot. I think if you search on that, magic cooking pot or the magical cooking pot. So I think curation, when you talk about collective intelligence, curation is a really easy way to get started with that. When I ask myself and when I ask other experts, what's the one thing you need to know before you want to jump in and participate in some online culture, virtual community, or group? learn what the norms and the boundaries of that group are before you participate. Read the FAQ. Ask people. And be sure to recursively crap detect yourself before you pass along information that might not be right. So, collaboration. I get into some detail. I was enlightened by Eric Eugene Kim when I started questioning about this on Twitter. He pointed me to a paper by a fellow by the name of Arthur Himmelman. I'm not entirely sure that's the correct spelling of it, about the difference between coordination, cooperation, and collaboration. I get into some detail in that in the book. I can't really get into all of the details. I do entire lectures on smart mobs. I'm quite sure you know what I'm talking about from Cairo to New York City to Moscow. People are using social media to organize collective action in ways that they weren't before. And it's not just political collective action. I would include what we're doing here, Wikipedia, a lot of other sources as well. Virtual communities, there must be millions of different virtual communities out there. I would be surprised if nobody in this group belonged to a virtual community. And you probably know I wrote a book about that some years ago. The book is available online. I didn't cue that up, but it'll just take me a second to find it for you. So I wrote this book so long ago that publishers didn't reserve digital rights. So I put this book up in 1994 because I felt that there was so much bad information about the internet. There needed to be some good information about the internet as well. You know, in terms of listing communities, here's a really interesting archaic it'll just take me a second to. So we tried to do this when I had Electric Minds in 1996. We thought we would create a virtual community center where we would go search for virtual communities and try to describe them ethnographically, and provide that information for people. So when you look at this, note that it's 1996. It still ought to be done, but we found that it doesn't scale very well. You can't really automate rating a virtual community, and it doesn't really do justice to them to spend 10 minutes on it and then give it an evaluation. So when people are aggregating their computing power to look for life in outer space, to help biochemists figure out how protein molecules fold, go here if you want to get involved with that. Yes, like trying to create a community. You know, I say that you can create the environment for a community, but communities will grow or they won't grow, and you can facilitate it, you can help it, but it's not something that can be engineered. Now, of course, a lot of people discovered that in the first .com boom, when they thought, build it and they will come. Build it and people will not pay attention to you unless you have a really strong reason for them to do so. So, you know, I'm going through some of the many forms of collaboration, collective intelligence, crowdsourcing. When Jim Gray went missing, computer scientist, his friends got recent photographs of the area where his sailboat had gone missing outside of the San Francisco Bay. They put it up on Amazon's Mechanical Turk, and thousands of people went through 500,000 images. They didn't find Jim Gray, but they were able to throw this together in just a few hours. All kinds of things can be done. Again, creating knowledge together. And what we're doing here, cooperative learning and collaborative learning, I believe, work together and are distinct, in that collaborative has to do with working together on projects, and cooperative has to do with taking some responsibility for helping other learners learn. So, I've got an entire course I teach on a literacy of cooperation, and you may have seen my TED talk about that. Again, I'll go look something up here. Actions climb the curve of engagement and power law of participation. Start participating in a lightweight way, and it will draw you in to participate in more committed ways. There's a lot of ways to participate. Self-election is something that, and this notion of scratching an itch, doing something for yourself, but making it available to others. That's how open source production manages to cut out the entire overhead of management, or most of the overhead of management, and enable people to find the tasks they want. If you're an expert on a particular kind of ant, you can make the Wikipedia page for that. It adds up. People contribute for a lot of reasons. Steven Weber wrote a book called The Success of Open Source and did some polling. People contribute to open source in order to learn how to program, in order to enhance their reputation, which of course can be monetized, in order socially to meet other people and to add to a public good. So it's not always strictly self-interest, it's not always altruism, there's always a mix involved. And casual conversation builds trust. How many times have you heard, I don't participate in Twitter because I don't want to know what my friends had for lunch that day? Of course, that's a stereotype. I don't know how many people talk about what they had for lunch anymore. I think they've all migrated to the platforms where you take photographs of your lunch and send it to everybody, like Instagram. But casual conversation is important. It's what enables networks of trust and norms of reciprocity, i.e. social capital, to accumulate and spread. So I'm going to move through this last one fairly quickly. Network awareness, network know-how really combines a lot of different learnings from different disciplines, from this sociology, from network science, from social psychology, from computer science, from media studies, from just looking at what happens online. There are a lot of different things to learn, like what a small world network is, about how people accumulate and use social capital. This whole notion of networked individualism that's emerging from sociology. The difference between and importance of strong ties and weak ties, and having a portfolio of both, the difference between bridging capital and bonding capital. These are all specialist terms that have emerged in different disciplines that suddenly become important tools to use if you're going to live online. So I've tried to make a kind of survey of network science, social network analysis, and some of the other disciplines, and make those learnings available to people. Oh, we were already there. So, I think that the proliferation of multimedia is not going away. It's climbing into high gear, and I think that paying attention to the technologies is going to miss the point. If you want to stay on top of it, I think you need to pay attention to the literacies, and I think that the literacies are connected to one another. So the website's not up yet. Maybe in a couple of weeks it'll be up. The book will be available in March. You can pre-order it now. One thing that I like to do with people after doing a presentation like this is to experiment with mind mapping. And so, I think is kind of magical here that you can use the collaborative whiteboard and you can create shapes on it, and you can create words on it. You can change the size of those words, and so I could make this kind of the first node, and then, so what are the other nodes? So there are the, for the secondary nodes, I use boxes instead, and for example, attention. So we can move that into this box. We can make a line connecting it here. So you get the point. Why not just jump in, put some words in, put things in boxes, arrange things. You can click on that little arrow on the top and move something around and put it next to something. I'd love to see people do this. Okay, so that crooked line there, you're using the little pencil. It works better if you use the line tool. You know, I think what's magical about this is we can't really see who's doing what, and so it just kind of emerges, and we can take a screenshot of this, and people who I've done this with in the past. You can also upload pictures here as well. So, for example, maybe I can find something that's relevant on my desktop. And load that, and you can size these things. Oops. No, I'm trying to size this. So you got something. So if you want to, if you made a mark and you want to delete it, you can click on the little arrow tool and then click on the mark and then delete. I'm kind of a neat freak, but I think it helps to just play with this stuff. Okay, where's the motivation for the teacher prep programs to change going to come from? You know, that's a real problem, because education in a lot of places just keeping the schools open and not having 100 students in a classroom is a real issue. Teachers aren't paid that well anyway. They don't have that much extra time. Who's going to pay them to do this? Where's the time going to come from to learn how to do these things? I think that's a real issue. I'm very interested in learning. I'm somewhat clueless about how we're going to change educational institutions. There better be an ebook version, you know. So the publisher's MIT Press, which I think is good for this. I think they want to make their money off the hardbound. I'm pushing them to release an ebook as soon as possible. I also asked them at the beginning of the enterprise whether I could make the entire book available for free as a PDF. I couldn't talk them into it, but they said, well, maybe you can make a chapter available. So really the first chapter of the book is meant to be a roadmap to the whole book. I wrote it with that in mind, and I'm hoping to make that chapter available as well. Pressure on governments to change curriculum and delivery requirements. Well, it's harder in a really heterogeneous democracy like the U.S., where there are a lot of people don't want evolution taught in schools. It's easier in places like Singapore, where they decided that education and learning are an important national priority, and it's more of an authoritarian government, and they can decree spending money on public education. There's a big social issue there, and frankly, as I've said, I don't know. However, I decided early when I started teaching and using social media and teaching that instead of trying to change the institutions, I would provide the the best possible resources I could for the people who wanted to change on their own. And I do blog for DML Central. Let me go look for that one. I find all kinds of teachers out there who are doing all kinds of great things on their own. So I think that there's a certain amount of bottom-up innovation that's happening, and I don't think that we have the time to wait for that to happen. I think that we need some more centralized support of these resources. But for the time being, there's all kinds of innovation going on. The Change MOOC is a great example of it, and changing the narrative about what's possible is an important part of change.
Howard, this is Dave Cormier here. We usually try to keep these as close to an hour as we can, but I wonder if you wouldn't have time. I'd like to ask at least one more question. We're going to take some of these conversations into tomorrow, but one of the things I found interesting in the way that it was a great presentation, by the way, I really enjoyed it, is you talk about Sherry Turkle and Nicholas Carr and the concerns that people have about how social media is changing culture. One of the things that I think comes out in some of the stuff you're doing here, I'm wondering how you feel about this, is that part of our responsibility is to bring some of these literacies in as profound and as you say, well-researched and as socially productive ways as possible to lead people towards socially productive ways of using social media. And we talked a little bit in the discussion about how it helps change schools, but I'm wondering if you think that some of these literacies can help change culture as well. I think we've got some lips moving again, Howard.
I'm sure you're aware of the new book by Doug Thomas, not that new, Doug Thomas and John C. Brown, about a new culture of learning. It's, I think if you are 14 years old and you're a little web savvy and you want to learn how to do something, YouTube is the first place you go to learn it. You can learn an amazing number of things by going to YouTube. There are just so many resources available now, and to a certain degree, young people are teaching each other. I don't really subscribe to this, everybody from the digital native generation knows everything that they're doing, but there certainly is a culture of learning that uses a lot of the resources that are available that people use for their interests, whether it's online gaming or building model airplanes, whatever it is you're interested in. You can find your community, you can find resources online. I think it's important that in the U.S., the McCarthy Foundation, when they decided to put money into this, they call it digital media and learning and not digital media and education. So I think learning's happening all over the place, and education has a lot of great things to learn from the kind of culture of learning that's springing up.
That's great. Thanks a lot.
Okay,
Howard,
tomorrow let's continue.
Absolutely. Same time, same place. We're going to do, it's 11 o'clock Pacific in the United States. It's 3 p.m. Atlantic, and a whole lot of other things and a whole lot of other time zones. Thanks, everybody. Thanks very much, Howard. That was a really excellent session today. And I look forward to the open discussion tomorrow and see if we can't get something fun going back and forth. Thanks, everybody.